William Gaddis once said, "Power doesn't corrupt people. People corrupt power." Keep this in mind as we go through the 5 types of power and the 3 laws of power, and why it's so important that you really understand how power works. It's been something that we were not necessarily taught in school, but power affects every area of your life. It affects the dynamics in your relationships between your spouse or your children. It affects the relationships that exist inside of businesses, and it exists between countries. So at every single level of our societal structure, power is a major component. It's what people seek more than almost anything else. So it's critically important that you understand how power really works. Let's dive into it. Let's go into power really quickly and what power actually is. So power is the ability to influence or cause someone to do something that you want them to do. And in some cases that they would not do on their own or that they would not do naturally. There's a huge allure to that. Have you ever wanted someone to do something just because you wanted them to? It may have been in a business situation where you wanted someone even at the grocery store to give you an expired coupon or, doing a deal and you wanted it to go through. So if you've ever really wanted somebody to do something for you, whether they wanted to or not, you understand the allure of power. Now that's easily abused because with great power comes great responsibility. And if you have the ability to have a lot of people do the things that you want them to do, you have to be responsible to their needs as well as your own. That's why in a lot of circumstances, if you have ever experienced this in your work life or maybe home life, where somebody got a little bit of power and they went a little crazy with it, it's because there really is an allure to power. But power in itself is not bad. Power is a natural force. It's something that exists not only in human beings, but it exists in the animal world. It exists in nature herself. There's an enormous amount of power that comes with a storm, with a thunderstorm, with a hurricane, with a tsunami. Now, those things affect the world around them in a way that would not have happened otherwise. They're exerting that influence, that control over the outside environment. So it's very natural and it's very normal to have power. It is just part of this world the way that it is. But power has laws, and there are 3 laws of power. The first is that power is never static. It's either accumulating or decaying. And you see that in business, or you see that in global politics. One country will gain an enormous amount of power and then they'll lose that power. It's either accumulating or decaying. Let's look at the British Empire. There's a joke that we tell sometimes on our other channel, Geopolitics and Conflict, where we say that most countries' independence days are from Britain. And that is because Britain used to be a giant empire and now it is a much smaller one. Power either decays or it grows. The next law of power is that power is like water. It flows through everyday life, and directing that flow is what gives you more or less power. Think of it in the case of large corporations. Large corporations can influence large groups of people, whether it's the food industry, and a lot of what the food industry has done to lobby governments to grow more or less types of food. They can do that because they have funneled an enormous amount of money to them. And we'll talk a little bit more about money later when we talk about the 5 types of power. But being able to direct the flow of one type of power makes a huge difference. In terms of the military, the way that you are able to amass a large group of people and have them do the things that you want them to do, that is directing the flow of energy, directing the flow of power. The third law of power is that power compounds. that means that power begets more power, and powerlessness begets more powerlessness. And you can see that in societal structure. You can see that in everyday society. You can see that the people who don't really have power, who are not in the rooms making the big decisions, they remain powerless. Whereas the people in power, they're the ones making deals with each other. They're the ones who are directing what the world looks like for the vast majority of us. And there are only a handful of them, and they tend to keep power with themselves. So power compounds. The types of power are important to know because they're not all obvious, but they all are exerted on you all the time. So if you aren't aware of what they are, or even that they are power in themselves, then you may be falling, I guess, victim to them without even knowing that it's happening. The first type of power is physical power. This is police, military, but it can also be fighting. It can also be weapons. But it's the things that are influential that cause power to either be had or not had that are physical in nature. If someone is stronger, physically stronger than another person, and let's say they're trained in martial arts, they might be able to very easily, in most cases, overpower somebody who is smaller, weaker, and does not have any training. So this is physical power. Countries utilize this with their militaries. Governments use that with their police forces. So physical power is a very obvious type of power. The next type of power is wealth. And the thing about wealth is that with wealth, you can buy all the other types of power. Very, very interesting, because we don't always think of the other types as buyable. So let's dive into that. Wealth, I feel like, doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. You understand what wealth and power are. You understand that large corporations can lobby governments. They can choose whether you get a mortgage for your house or not. You can buy whatever else you want. You can buy private security if you need it. You can buy influence. You can buy followers. You can buy ways to influence people in large masses. You can do that all through wealth, and that is very heavily done through wealth. The next type of power is state actions. This is laws and bureaucracy. So if you've ever been to the DMV, you know that those DMV workers have a lot of power over you. Maybe that you don't particularly like, but they do. They have a lot of power over you. Now, the amount of laws that you have to follow, if you want to start a business, for example, you can't just go out and start one. You have to follow the appropriate channels to start a business. If you want to get married legally, you can't just go out and get married. You have to file the appropriate documentation and follow the appropriate laws to make a choice, a personal choice, like getting married. The next one is very interesting, and that is social norms. We don't often think of social norms as a type of power, but they are a huge type of power. Do you remember when you were in middle school or high school or elementary school, and there were the popular kids? And most of us were not the popular kids. I certainly was not. But most of us looked up to them. We wanted to be like them. So maybe we bought the same type of shoes that they did. Maybe we did our hair the same way that they did. Maybe we wished that we were them. Because those people seemed to have gotten all of the things that we wanted. Social norms is what is acceptable by society. The problem with social norms is that they can fairly easily be manipulated. How many of you remember commercials from when you were a kid? Now, those commercials were very often aimed at creating a social norm. The next is ideas, and this one we can see changes the course of history. Gender rights. For example, for a very long time in the United States, women couldn't vote. Women couldn't own property, and women couldn't own businesses. They couldn't work. And so that became an idea movement to allow women the rights that men had at the time. This happened with racial equality. This has happened with many, many things over the course of many, many civilizations where there were balances of power. Because remember, power is never static. If you go back to the laws, power is never static. It never stays with one group, one organization, one person. It never stays. And so since power is fluid, one of the ways that it's fluid is through ideas. Ideas can change the world, and they have changed the world. The next is through numbers. This type of power is, I think, the most often overlooked. Numbers are what creates power. Now, we think that it's all of these other things, but ultimately, even wealth, even physical power, they all are meant to influence numbers. So, for example, one large group of people or one very vocal but small group of people can change the course of how any event goes. This is a thing that happens with social structure, and it's something that's happening right now very much in the United States, is that we are told that power exists only with a certain group of people. Only a group of elite people have this power. The billionaires of the world, the politicians of the world, they're the ones who have the power. But think about this. Who gives them that power? Let's say that it's a large corporation, for example, that has lobbying power. Who gave them that power? We did, by shopping there, by giving their organization wealth, by giving their organization employees, by giving their organization resources. In numbers, that's how anything grows. If a corporation wants to grow and not die, because remember, power either grows or it decays. Now, who does that? It doesn't give it to itself. All power comes from numbers. If you have a large number of people that are feeding a particular organization, that's how that organization remains strong. So remember, the real foundation of power is in numbers. Take a look at your own life, and this is universal across your country, your government, your religion, your political views, your family, your personal relationships, your children. This is the same across all of these different parts of your life. Pay attention to where each of these things are affecting you. And always ask yourself, do I want more of this or do I want less of this? Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.